Atlanta after midnight is a soft-spoken argument. Streetlights lean in low, as if sharing secrets they don't want anyone to repeat. Marta breathes in its sleep. The air tastes like hot pennies and busted speaker wire. I was 21, too old to be naive and too young to be wise, walking out of a practice space off Northside, carrying a second-hand Strat that buzzed if you looked at it wrong, and a head full of riffs that couldn't pay rent. He found me with his headlights first, an old station wagon idling like it had been told to wait its turn. You know the kind, too square to be cool again, but stubborn enough to keep living out of spite. White paint, tired chrome, roof rack bowed in the middle like a shrug. The driver's window eased down and the night introduced us. "You gigging?" he asked, and the question was a handshake that pretends to be a favor. He had the voice of someone who has practice in rooms that don't want him. Clear, tidy diction, an Atlanta lilt that knew when to stay out of the way, and that little smile that can be friendliness or confidence or hunger depending on the angle. A lanyard with a laminate hung from his rearview mirror. A cassette recorder sat on the passenger seat, red light winking like it had enjoyed a secret. I nodded because nodding is a cheaper answer than words. "Just practice." "Musician," he said, pleased, like a conjurer who pulled the right card. "I run a little production outfit, studio time, showcases, a couple of radio ears. You know Gemini?" He flashed a business card between two fingers, white, clean type, a shiver of authority. Chaka Productions. The name wore itself like it wanted the city to remember. I told him the truth the way you tell a cop you've only had one beer, politely, hoping you sound harmless. "We're looking for someone who'll listen." "I always listen," he said, and made the phrase feel like a rule, not a promise. "Hop in, 5 minutes. If you're not interesting in 5, you're not interesting in 50. He smiled again, too many teeth showing to be entirely kind. "I'll hear you." The safe answer is no. The human answer is maybe. The musician's answer at 1 in the morning, after a rehearsal that turned fingers into little bruised animals, after a day of being told the world doesn't need another chord. The musician's answer is, what if this is how it happens? I looked at the card. The fonts were neat, the numbers straight, the little logo a pair of twin masks like the name promised. Gemini, comedy and tragedy holding hands like liars who swear they'll never cheat. 5, I said, because men like me prefer to hang our bad ideas on numbers. I opened the door. The wagon's interior smelled like shampoo and plastic and the stubborn ghost of cigarette smoke in the carpet. A roll of nylon cord coiled on the floor like a pet snake pretending to nap. The cassette recorder clicked as if it wanted witnesses. "I'm Calvin," I said, because real names feel like seatbelts. He told me his, and the syllables arranged themselves in a tidy little stack my brain decided to remember without knowing why. He looked mid-20s and baby-faced, but with the kind of eyes that have opinions about receipts. Nice shirt, pressed, everything ironed into place except the night. "Seatbelt," he said pleasantly. 5 minutes. We'll do a quick pass. What you got, what you want, what you think you are. You'd be surprised how many people haven't decided. He pulled away from the curb with the competence of men who pretend rules are manners. Northside slid past, the closed taco window, the guy sweeping a strip club doorway like he could erase the night with a broom. A police cruiser lurked under a dying sycamore, the two men inside doing that posture that says we're here and also we're not. We took a right and then a left, and the city rewrote itself around us into a quieter version. Warehouses sleeping with their lights on, chain-link fences tired of their jobs. "Tell me you're set," he said, flicking the cassette recorder on with his thumb. "Keep it tight. Verse me. Chorus me. Don't seduce me. I already got a girlfriend." He laughed at his own joke, a dry little sound, and I laughed because I wanted him to like my laugh. I told him about the band, me and Gerard, and a drummer who insisted on being called Sinclair because that's what the gas station on his street used to be. I told him what I could do with a guitar when no one scared me. I told him about a singer who said she'd be back from Macon and had been gone for 3 months. "Genre?" he asked. "Something you can play in a room with a sticky floor," I said, and he liked that enough to write it down in a notebook he'd produced like a trick. His handwriting was neat in the way of men who expect other people to read them later. "You ever sit for studio?" he asked. I shook my head. You ever sit for anything? He asked, and his eyes flicked once to my hands on my knees like he was taking inventory. I sat for my SATs, I said. Didn't turn into a scholarship. He grinned. I like you. He liked that I answered like a person, not like an applicant. He liked that I was tired and trying. He liked that I was polite. He liked how easy it would be to keep liking me, even if I tired him later. We rolled through a part of town where the map gets shy. Street names turn into polite suggestions. The lights decide they've already done their 8 hours. He didn't miss a turn. He had a plan the way a key has a purpose. He asked about my mama. He asked about my rent. He asked about the first time music felt like it owned you, and nodded like a therapist when I told him about a middle school auditorium and a cheap amp that buzzed like a trapped fly, and the feeling your fingers get when you choose the right note for the first time on purpose. You're teachable, he said. Teachable's the trick. We crossed a bridge, and the air changed the way it does near water, even when you can't see it. The night did that thing Georgia nights do, slipped a wet hand into yours and pretended that's affectionate. I remembered to be nervous, and then forgot again because he kept me busy with questions the same way dentists keep you talking about football with both hands in your mouth. We do showcases out by Smyrna, he said. Warehouse space, couple of good ears, a radio ad guy who owes me $2. We can stop by and scribble you in for the end of the month. You got people? I can put 10 chairs in your corner if you can't. This is how people like me go missing. Attention mixed with logistics. He knew my music. He knew my schedule. He knew my hunger. He would feed it and then decide whether I had to pay. You sure it's not too late? I asked, because manners are stubborn even when you don't want them. He smiled the way bankers smile when you apologize for wasting their time while giving them your money. It's never too late if you're promising. I looked down because my eyes wanted to, and that's when I noticed the carpet, a pale sea green plush that didn't belong in a car this old. It was clean, too clean, no crumbs, no dirt. The nap lay in one direction like someone had taught it how to behave. The kind of clean you get when you vacuum after you've made a mess and you don't want to remember. What kind of dog was it? I asked, because you don't carry that much carpet lint without ever carrying a dog. He smiled at the road. Everybody's a detective after midnight, he said, and it wasn't an answer. I tugged my seatbelt a hair tighter. He pretended not to notice. The cord on the floor looked like a shirt that had fallen to sleep. I told myself it could be for gear. Everything in the world is for something until it isn't. You nervous? He asked, conversational, like a doctor who's bored with your chart. A little. Good, he said. Nerves make you loud enough to live. He glanced at the clock. You close to your mama? I laughed because the whiplash was intentional, and I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of looking dizzy. She collects my report cards, I said. Still. She'll like this one, he said, and his smile stayed while his eyes went somewhere colder. Crack the window if you need to. I did. The air that came in was river cool and register metallic, like a coin you sucked as a kid on a dare. He adjusted the radio down to a mumble, news static, and a DJ riding the transition too hard. The road dipped, and our headlights painted the belly of a different bridge. The city had quietly stepped away to make room for this, the kind of place people choose when they don't want to be interrupted. Let's pull for 1 minute, he said lightly. Just one. I want to write something down you said so I don't have to misquote you to myself. He nosed us onto the shoulder so gentle the car barely noticed. I noticed. He left the engine on. He left the radio breathing. He clicked the dome light with 2 fingers, and the wagon's interior became a small room with unflattering lighting, like every backstage hallway that smells like beer and story. The cord on the floor didn't look like a nap anymore. I turned to say something easy. You good? You need a pen? And found his face already close to mine, as if he'd leaned in on a cue I didn't hear. The cassette recorder's red eye watched with interest. You're teachable, he said again softly, and the word pried at the joint between my ribs. That's the part that saves people, you know that? When the minute says do this, and you do it. When the voice says, don't make me use the extra, and you say yes, sir. He shook his head, disappointed for effect. Some boys don't learn that. Some boys make me become things I don't prefer. My throat closed and then decided to open because breathing is a stubborn saint. I'm a man, I said, ridiculous and necessary. He smiled. It touched nothing in his face. You're a man who wants to be helpful, he said. Same church, different hymn. He tipped the cassette recorder toward me with 2 fingers. Say your name. I did. My voice sounded like it had been left outside. Say you understand you're safe if you listen. I said it. He watched how it fit in my mouth, like a dentist measuring whether a crown will bite your cheek when you talk. Good, he said. Hands on your knees. I put them there. The cord on the floor had learned how to stand up without help. You ever tie knots? He asked conversationally. Boys like you tie trucks. Boys like me tie stories. He smiled. Hands. There's a moment before your wrists meet when you can still pretend the night is a hallway you can back down. The skin between thumb and index looked suddenly tender in the dome light, an animal you don't want to watch get tagged. He brought the cord like a teacher with a demonstration. He didn't point the gun at me because he didn't need one. His confidence was the weapon. He looped clean. He cinched tidy. It didn't hurt. That was worse. Good, he said softly, confirming me to myself. Good. He smelled like soap and radiator heat and an idea of control. Calvin, we're going to take a little drive. You're going to keep your mouth because you're trying to be helpful. You're going to remember that men who are helpful go home. Nobody will believe you if you don't let me, I said, and the sentence sounded wrong even as it worked. Believe me? He smiled and flashed the card again, Chaka Productions, as if the fonts could testify. They'll believe my neat. They always do. He slid the wagon back into the road like a knife returning to a sheath. The dome light died and the night corrected itself. My hands were in my lap like they always knew to live there. The cord was barely a suggestion. He'd tied something that punished movement, not existence. I did the thing you do when fear has its own chair in the car. I narrate my body to myself so it doesn't run. Breath, knees, hands, eyes, streetlight, shoulder, breath again. You believe in talent? He asked. Or you think it's just time and hunger? I think it's noticing, I said, because answers buy minutes. He smiled. That's almost smart. We rolled onto a road with fewer lights and more intention. Water nearby breathed under something heavy and old. The bridge rose, a dark ribcage, the city's silhouette off to the right like a mother on a porch pretending not to watch her kids play in traffic. He slowed. A car coming the other way flashed its brights as if trying to change the subject. He did not care for the subject, so he kept it. You see that? He asked mildly. What? Nothing, he said, and smiled to himself like the punchline had been delivered off stage. Hands still? Yes! Good boy. He liked that I hated that. We moved on to the bridge. The night opened its mouth and the river spoke fluent black. The concrete guardrail was the color of old bread. The sign, James Jackson Parkway, flickered by like a witness who didn't want to testify. He let the wagon creep, the tires making a sound like poured sugar. The radio murmured 2 men arguing about baseball like we were in a world where that mattered. The cord touched my wrist in a way that suggested it knew where I lived. What's your worst habit? He asked suddenly. Musically. Overplaying, I said. What's your worst habit? Humanly. Being polite. He laughed, and it was genuine. I wanted to bottle it and drink it later when the night let me or didn't. You gonna ask me mine? What's yours? Making sure, he said calmly. And then, because he enjoyed symmetry, he added, and neatness. He killed the headlights. Darkness is never really dark in a city, but this felt like the closest it gets when it wants to impress you. The dashboard lights became little islands. The cassette recorder's red eye looked obscene. I turned my head because the human animal still wants to see even when it can't. Don't, he said gently. Eyes forward. Somewhere under the bridge, something moved. A fish, a log, a judgment. The night went quiet like it wanted to eavesdrop. I swallowed, and my throat told me that was the wrong thing to do, and did it anyway. He put the wagon in park and let the engine run like a white noise machine for terrible people. Windows, he said, crack yours, breathe it in. I did. The river air smelled like someone else's memory of church basements and winter coats, drafty and heavy and unwanted. He leaned, closer than he needed to, close enough I could count the little nicks, shaved hair leaves along a man's jawline. He reached across me like a boyfriend being sweet and unlocked my door. It made a sound like an idea falling apart. "We doing this on the bridge?" I asked, and surprised myself by how flat my voice found the word we. "Briefly," he said. "I have a minute to show you a thing." He opened my door an inch. The knight's fingers came in friendly. He didn't push further. He let me feel the possibility of air that isn't yours. He let me taste the wrong and the relief together because men like him understand appetizers. "Listen," he said, "do you hear anything?" "Cars," I said. "Water." "People?" he asked. "No." "Good," he said. "Hands." He brought the cord up, not to tighten, to remind. His hand brushed mine in a way that told the part of my brain that names touch to shut up. He took a breath, held it, let it out. He was rehearsing. "I want you to stand," he said calmly, "with your knees against the door, and I want you to be so helpful you don't make me forget how much I like music." I did the math fast. If I kept pretending, I ended up in a river. If I ran, I ended up a different way in a river. If I shouted, who would hear except the water? If I fought, he was soft but not weak, small but not light. He had the kind of strength tidy men have, the kind that knows exactly which inch to own. So I did something I'm not proud of and am deeply grateful for. I made a mess. I gagged. I turned my head and gagged again. And that third time I let it happen, ugly and human and real. Tacos and Mountain Dew and fear. It hit the immaculate carpet like rain on a formal dress. He made the sound tidy men make when a cup spills in a rented room, pinched disgust and a little awe. He looked down. The cord in his hand drooped because hands follow eyes. He swore, quiet and efficient. "Christ, man," he said, and there it was. The first time he sounded young. "Why are you going to do me like that?" "Because I'm helpful," I said. My voice shook like a window unit. I didn't apologize. He flinched again, almost laughed. Then the neatness came back over him like a coat. "We're doing this anyway," he said, steel returning to the syllables. He reached to pull the door. He'd have to shift his angle. He'd have to let go of either me or the cord or the door to make the geometry work. I waited for the moment when he would be exactly as helpful as I needed him to be. When people tell you to look for your moment, they never tell you that it looks like a spill. His left hand took the door. His right hand kept the cord, lazy, assuming I'd sit perfectly because that had been my job all night. I turned my wrists outward, not to free them, but to give the cord something else to think about. And I brought my knees up as if I had to stand, and my head down as if I might faint, and I threw my shoulder into his ribcage like I was apologizing to it. We tumbled in a small, polite disaster. The wagon rocked. The dome light blinked its offended yellow back to life. My door opened the rest of the way like it had been trying to leave for months. Air arrived with opinions. The cord loosened a fraction, just enough to tell my fingers where the future lived. "Stop," he said, and there wasn't anger in it yet, just surprise. He reached for the cord again. I went the other way, down and out, knees scraping the breathless black of the road, palms learning that bridges collect sand like confessions. I hit the guardrail with my chest and memory and realized how thin it is between who you are and what the river wants. "Calvin," he said, my name suddenly official, "don't make me." "You said I was helpful," I said, and rammed my shoulder under the top lip of the guardrail like a lever. He came after me, not in a rush, not in a roar. He came neatly. He gathered the cord so it wouldn't drag. He shut off the dome light. He touched the cassette recorder and clicked it into silence like a teacher erasing a board. Then he stepped out, smooth, and the sound of his shoes finding the road was the quietest thing I have ever heard. We faced each other like two kids called to the front of a church. He kept his body between me and the driver's seat without looking like that's what he was doing. He had me and the river and the city and the hour arranged on a mental index card, and he was threading a needle through us. "We'll take a breath," he said. "We'll fix the little mess." He flicked his eyes down, 1, 2, to my socks blackened by the road, to my knees whispering blood, to the cord's bow on my wrists. "We'll be done by the time anybody knows we were here." "Who's anybody?" I asked, because questions are sand in tidy gears. He smiled. "You always talk this much? Or is it just that the audience finally got good?" "Ask me about my set," I said, because I needed to hear a version of a sentence from 10 minutes ago when I thought my life was about chorus and not about current. His smile returned to its default, friendly cruelty. "All right," he said. "Tell me your set." "You first," I said. "You tell me yours." He blinked in genuine amusement. "You're a lot." "You invited me. I always do," he said, and the line landed too true. He stepped closer and the river raised its voice the smallest degree, as if advising me that gravity had recently been promoted. His right hand brought the cord up, his left hand went gentle like a parent. "Hands," he said. I did a small, helpful thing. I offered them, because when you comply, sometimes the world thinks you belong. As he reached, I took one step sideways along the guardrail, tiny, the kind of step a polite man takes to give a woman her purse in a crowded aisle. His eyes tracked my face. His feet tracked me. We moved together like a bad dance taught by a worse man. That's when the sound came. Not a siren. A big truck, heavy, the kind that belongs to departments that get to drive along the edges of things, the kind with spotlights that don't ask permission. Far end of the bridge. The engine note stepped on the night like it owned a deed. His head twitched the tiniest degree. He hated extra. Trucks are extra. "Don't," he said without looking, and I understood he meant, "Don't you wave," while he decided whether to be tidy or sudden. His eyes cut back to me. "You stay. You look like you're listening." "You wanted an audience," I said. His smile had edges now. "Front," he said. "Eyes." The truck drew closer. Light trawled the bridge like a slow thought. He stepped in to block me from it, to make my body part of the car's shadow. He was calculating, spotlight angle, door angle, which story he'd start with if somebody stopped. He could talk his way out of a room. He could talk a room out of itself. "You ever jump off anything?" he asked mildly. "Dives, docks, stupid boy stuff?" "Once." I said, "Summer camp. Counselor told me my form was a crime." "You'd splash," he said, "just so you know." He said it like a man who studies water as an accomplice. The truck reached us. It slowed the way government slows, performance and purpose mixed in equal measure. A spotlight cut across the guardrail, across the wagon's white flank, across his profile. For the first time tonight, I saw his face the way cameras steal them, flat, unarguable. He was handsome in the way of boys made pretty by certainty. The light caught the business card on the seat and made Chaka glow for a second like a neon sign promising breakfast. We both stood very still, like children playing a game their parents don't know the name of. The spotlight hesitated, won a small argument with itself, and moved on. The truck rolled past. I saw the letters on the door, the silhouette of the driver, the way hands do their job when they don't want to change your life. My heart did that boxer's shuffle in my chest, 2 quick feints and a punch. "See," he murmured, voice warm with triumph. "Nobody. It's just us. Best shows always are." The truck's brake lights flared. It slowed. It stopped. On the bridge, 50 yards ahead. He didn't move. Its reverse lights came on, cold and immediate. The backup beeper, a little apology, clicked alive. It began to roll toward us, slow, cautious, in the way of men who have learned to rehearse their own deaths. "Don't," he said again. And now the word contained an inventory of options he didn't want to have to choose from. He took one decisive step, toward me, into me, hand going for my shoulder to move me where I'd be quiet, where the shadow would keep me. The cord tickled my fingertips, and I made my least polite choice of the night. I lifted my hands to meet his, gentle, agreeing, helpful, and when his fingers brushed the knot, I twisted my wrists like I was wringing water from a rag. Knots are proud until they're not. The loop gave. My left hand bit free. The right still wore the cord like a bracelet that had opinions. It was enough. "Hey," the driver shouted, a good man alarmed in a good way. The spotlight swung back, fast now, more certain. It washed us in a bath nothing pretty can survive. The man in front of me changed and didn't. He smiled, charming and clean, turned toward the light with a hand up, like, "Aw, shucks, officer, we were just," and simultaneously leaned his left hip into me hard enough to make the guardrail say my name. He looked like an assistant. He felt like gravity. His right hand, cord loose now, useless, went to my stomach to steady me. The part of me that always says I'm sorry woke up stupidly and tried to apologize to the hand that was about to decide whether I got to keep evenings. "Sir," the driver called. A door clanged, a boot on concrete, another door opened. The night gathered participants. He felt the calculus change, and he hated it. "Don't you move," he breathed, and it wasn't to me, not just. It was to the world for having the audacity to keep going. "Officer," he called loudly, and switched to a good, clear public voice as if he'd been born speaking in presser. "We had a little car sickness. My friend's fine. I'm a music promoter. We pulled off so he wouldn't." "Hands," the officer said, and he said it in that way men trained say it. The word is the whole instruction. "Both of you." I put mine up. My right wrist still wore the cord. It looked like I'd brought evidence to a party that didn't need it. He lifted his palms clean, fingers long. He looked like a choir boy auditioning. He smiled the smile you use on bank tellers and busy mothers. The officer slowed his approach, the spotlight steady, the radio saying polite, efficient things to the other men the city keeps for when it can't be everywhere. "Step away from the railing," the officer said. We stepped. My knees retrieved themselves. The cord dropped off my right wrist with a soft, traitorous whisper. "You gentlemen got ID?" the officer asked. "Yes, sir," he said smoothly. "Of course, my car." He gestured a little. "Slow," the officer said. "Everything's slow." He obeyed beautifully. He had practiced. He had a move for this. The wallet produced not quite from pocket but from console, the show of license, the professional card, Shaka Productions, laid gently on the hood like his resume for being allowed to keep the world the way he wanted. He talked while he obeyed, like a magician who knows patter is half the trick. "Just coming back from a studio check," he said. "Guy gets queasy sometimes. I'm the kind of man who doesn't let a friend be messy on public property." He chuckled. The officer did not. "You know how it is." The officer did not know how it was. He kept his eyes on the river more often than he looked at us. He listened to it with his body. Other footsteps. Another light. Another man. The bridge, which had been a private little chapel, became a stage where the audience sits close enough to see mistakes. "What's your name?" The officer asked me. I told him. My voice sounded like a boy. He looked at my wrists, at the pink bands the cord had written. He looked at the carpet inside the wagon, at the vomit bright as a confession. He looked at the tidy man beside me, and he saw the thing tidy men hate most, extra. "Step to the truck," he told me, and I did, because I had been so very helpful tonight, and I wanted to keep being that person. Behind me, I heard the rhythm of questions. "Where you headed? Where you coming from? Who's Cheryl Johnson? You got a number for Cheryl Johnson. Why you on this bridge? Why your headlights off? Why you telling me stories the river doesn't want to hear?" His answers were excellent, calm, compiled, neat in the way a file folder is neat, even if you've hidden the wrong thing behind the right tab. "Sir," the second officer said to the first quietly, not whispering because men like that don't need to conspire to protect the truth. "Hear anything?" The first officer looked at the river like a man who's married to it. He said nothing. He didn't have to. "Step away from the car," he told the man who had invited me into his life. "Hands where we can see them." A muscle moved in the man's jaw, tiny. He obeyed, of course. He obeyed like a king who knows how to bow so nobody forgets who made the rules. He smiled again. He didn't glance at me because boys like him never give witnesses the intimacy of eye contact when strangers with hats are present. "Calvin," he called lightly, the way a host calls to a guest from across a room he wants to continue controlling. "Tell them we're good." I opened my mouth, and the river beat me to it. The current shouldering past the bridge piles like a man late for work. I closed my mouth again. The officer put a hand on my shoulder, as if to say you don't have to help him anymore, and I cried a tiny, stupid tear, because sometimes permission is heavier than gravity. They asked me questions. I answered most of them, not all of them, because there are parts of a night like this that only come out later when you're checking your pockets for keys and find fear you forgot to throw away. They looked at the cord, they looked at the recorder, they looked at the notebook neat as a catechism. They looked at the business card and then at the sky like their mothers used to tell them to do when they didn't want to cuss. They let me sit in the truck with a paper cup of water while they were professional to the man who had a certificate for being allowed to be out late. Questions nested inside answers like Russian dolls. He was serenely patient until the moment he wasn't. When the officer said the name of a street, and he said another street, and the two didn't map to each other. It was such a small error, you would have microwaved it and eaten it in another life. Here, it curdled. They sent me away before anything that felt like cinema happened, because real life is uglier, but also kinder, because sometimes the best thing you can do for a person is let them not be a witness anymore. Someone could drive you, the officer said, but if you're steady, you can take yourself. We got your phone. We'll call. I'm steady, I lied. My whole body was a tuning fork struck by a god with a grudge. He looked at me the way men look at their sons when they decide to trust them with something that could cut them. You did good, he said, and then, because he didn't want to accidentally father me, you did fine. I drove away differently than I had arrived. My knees sat wrong on the pedal. My hands convinced the steering wheel to believe in them again. In the rear view, the bridge made itself into a mouth that had decided not to swallow tonight, but had bookmarked the page. Days make sense, even when nights don't. I went to work with a body that felt like it had been edited by a stranger and stacked boxes like they might apologize. I answered my sister's text with a picture of a biscuit and a smiley she didn't deserve, and she sent back, "Ooh, good?" And I typed, "Yeah," and then put my phone face down like a child who thinks he made night by closing his eyes. They called. Of course they called. They were gentle with their voices like they'd been practicing on each other. "We might need you for clarification," a detective told me. "We've got some details. We want to see which ones fit your puzzle." He asked me to come down to a room that smelled like Xerox and tired, and I did, because I wanted to repay the part of the city that had put a truck where a river wanted me. The first photograph wasn't a face, it was a car. You can tell a lot about a person by how a car ages around them. This one had squared shoulders and a dent that had had its day in court and lost. 1970 Chevrolet station wagon. The caption didn't need to say the color because the photo understood you could see white even in black and white. "That it?" the detective asked. "That was the kind of it," I said, and my voice found some of its old self because music had taught it how to when I wasn't looking. I remember the smell on the seatbelt, shampoo and heat. I remember the carpet. What do you call that green? The kind dentist waiting rooms buy. He smiled a little despite himself. "Seafoam," he said, "or something uglier." They asked me again about the recorder, about the notebook, about the way he kept his hands. They asked me about a name, he said, a fake singer, a fake audition, the address he invented like he was willing it into being. They asked me to circle something in a folder, and I didn't, because my brain didn't want the responsibility of being the reason lawyers talk later. But when they said Jackson Parkway, I couldn't help myself. My mouth said yes, like the road had rented an apartment in me. "This isn't going to go away," the detective said quietly, and I knew he didn't mean my fear. He meant the part of the city that had been losing kids and boys and grown men to a thing too shabby to call a monster and too tidy to call a mess. He meant that a lot of people had been waiting for a sound under a bridge. They didn't tell me the rest like a movie. They let me learn it like a citizen. The news called it the Atlanta youth murders, like it wanted to be accurate and ended up being careful. People said serial and said suspected and said we don't talk about this at dinner and said we have to. Mothers hugged children in the produce aisle even if they were too old to be hugged. Men looked at boys in the mirror and saw possibilities they didn't like. The city fought with itself and wore ribbons and wrote curfews and prayed in a way that offended both God and herself. From the far side of that week, I learned facts you don't want to know. About a bridge where officers heard a splash that wasn't a fish. About a car that presented itself to them seconds later like it had been summoned by the river. About a driver who said he was on his way to audition a singer named Cheryl Johnson, whose phone number the city couldn't find in a universe where numbers try to be remembered. About fibers and dogs and homes, and a pair of adult men whose names would take up residence in the paper and never be evicted. About how neatness becomes evidence if you look at it long enough. They asked me to testify. They didn't need me, they wanted me. I wore a shirt that didn't want to be tucked and told a room with woodwork how my night became a lesson, and the man who smiled at me like a host became a thing with plans. I described the bridge. I described the carpet. I described the cord and the way my wrists remembered it, like a childhood you're not allowed to insult in public. I described a spill. The defense attorney tried to make me dramatic. I did my best to be useful instead. "Why didn't you run earlier?" he asked, gently, like a nurse. "Because I am polite," I said, and people laughed the saddest laugh I have ever heard. Quiet, communal, medicinal. When it was done, it was not done. You can watch someone get sentenced and still not get your sleep back. You can watch a city put a man in a small square room and still see bridges whenever you close your eyes. I went home and my sister sat in my kitchen and pretended not to check my wrists when I reached for sugar. I left my guitar out on purpose, like it could guard me, and found myself petting it absent-mindedly, like a dog I couldn't afford. For a long time, I hated carpet. I got better in the way people do when they decide not to be worse. I learned how to make the river my friend again by not asking it to talk. I kept 2 roads with too many witnesses and a gas station that doesn't mind if you loiter. I carried $20 I could throw at someone else's night, so I didn't have to pick them up. I put the business card in a shoebox and taught myself how to forget it while remembering it perfectly. Every now and then, a wagon goes by and the world forgets to breathe for a second. Every now and then, I pull into a lot and see a person with a story who doesn't need me, and I wave them away kindly and go inside for a soda because sugar is a religion that has never asked me for more than I can give. Every now and then, music comes out of me like it used to before neatness tried to buy me, and I remember that the first note you choose matters, and so does where you look when you play it. I am not brave. I am helpful. Sometimes those are the same thing. I still think about his politeness, the way he offered the rule and the prize in the same sentence. You're safe if you listen. I did listen. I also made a mess. These truths do not cancel each other. They make me. The city still breathes over water. The bridges are still mouths. The river still takes what it is given and keeps secrets better than churches. But the night that tried to take me has to share now, with the truck, with the officers, with my sister, with my own dumb bravery that looks a lot like other people's accidents. It didn't get all of me. It got my patience with tidy men and my willingness to sit in strangers' cars. It got my certainty that music saves everybody. It did not get my hands. I use them every day. How am I doing now? Well, I keep my wrists unadorned, keep $5 for you good moments at bus stops, and I don't audition for anyone who needs the lights off. Killer reveal Wayne Bertram Williams, a.k.a. Atlanta child murders suspect, a.k.a. the Atlanta child killer, contested. Wayne Bertram Williams, born 1958, became the prime suspect in the Atlanta murders of 1979 to 1981 after a police stakeout on the Jackson Parkway bridge over the Chattahoochee River reported a loud splash around 2:50 a.m. on May 22, 1981. The first car to cross the bridge was Williams's white 1970 Chevrolet station wagon. Questioned at the scene, he claimed he was en route to audition a singer named Cheryl Johnson, a person and number investigators later could not verify. 2 days after the stop, the body of Nathaniel Cater, 27, was recovered from the river. Williams was convicted in 1982 of the murders of Cater and Jimmy Ray Payne, 21. And received 2 consecutive life sentences. Though never tried for the children's cases, authorities linked him through fiber and hair evidence to many of the youth murders, while debate about the full scope of responsibility has persisted for decades.